In the last part of this pre-fight analysis between Max Holloway and Brian Ortega, we're going to be looking at some potential game plans possibly used by both fighters. Before we get into that, let's take a look at one factor that could potentially determine the outcome of this fight. In my opinion, the factor that would have the most impact on the game plan of each fighter is the clinch. It is a well-known fact that Brian Ortega has a stronger grappling game than Max Holloway, and Max Holloway is a much better striker on the feet. The transition between the stand-up game and the ground game is obviously the takedowns in between, but we haven't seen anything from Brian Ortega to indicate that he is good at taking people down, in fact. However, we have seen that he is very dangerous from the clinch. He's especially good at snapping people down, going for the anaconda roll or the guillotine. Now let's take a look at how this can affect the game plan of each fighter. In part 1 of this analysis, we highlighted how Max Holloway loves to take the dominant angle in an open stance engagement. He also loves to set up the dominant angle with his low-line side kicks. In terms of striking, this is a great game plan, but in terms of avoiding the clinch, I'm going to show you exactly why this doesn't work. Here you see Max Holloway trying to take the dominant angle. Cub Swanson in response simply steps forward, putting his left arm around Holloway's neck, and now they're in a position to clinch. We can see this time and time again, here against Ricardo Lames, and here against Anthony Pettis. And if Holloway's low-line side kick misses and glides inside the opponent's leg, the forward momentum will actually take him into the clinch. In contrast, in a close stance engagement, the opponent has to evade the strikes in order to set up the clinch position, which is a much more energy-consuming and emotion-heavy movement. Now that we've gone through all this, let's take a look at potential game plans of each fighter, starting with Brian Ortega. Hypothetically speaking, it is within Brian Ortega's best interest to fight out of an open stance engagement for the advantage and opportunities to hit the clinch. From the open stance, Ortega can dig into the body of Max Holloway with his powerful body kicks. In this stance, Ortega can also tap the lead hand of his opponent and landing a jab through the space created. And here he is using it in combination with the body kick. Here's Ricardo Lames landing the exact same move on Max Holloway as Holloway tries to check hook. And of course, the fight is not always going to be in the open stance. Brian Ortega likes to create chaos, switching between open and closed stance. The specifics of what Brian Ortega uses in the closed stance, such as the Philly shell and the left hook, is highlighted in more detail in part 2 of this analysis. Now let's take a look at the potential game plan of Max Holloway. It is in Max Holloway's best interest to impose a close stance engagement and fight in a similar style as he did against Jose Aldo. As we've mentioned earlier, if Brian Ortega is to take the clinch in a close stance engagement, he will need to evade Max Holloway's punches by slipping, effectively making Max overexert himself and come to him. Holloway can use this to his advantage with the use of effective feints. In this clip, you see Max Holloway feinting Jose Aldo, drawing out big head movements from Aldo as he attempts to slip the punches. By doing this, Max keeps his opponents in constant reaction, which is very energy consuming. And by feinting and drawing out the correct reaction from his opponents, Max can hit them as they move through space. And here you see Holloway knocking down Jose Aldo in their first fight, as Aldo slips a non-committing right hand, and Max hits him with the 1-2 in the motion that Aldo is coming back with a left hook. Another advantage of forcing the close stance engagement is that Brian Ortega's Philly shell is actually not very defensively sound. Because he stands in such a square stance, it's hard for him to get his lead shoulder over to cover his chin. In his fight against Renato Moicano, Moicano lands a lot of straight punches through the Philly shell of Brian Ortega. And that concludes my pre-fight analysis. Whatever the outcome may be, this is going to be a cracker of a fight. and I hope you guys all enjoyed this one. As always, thanks for watching. This is Michael Z from the MMA Degree, signing off.